Okay, for the last lesson of Unit 4, we have two skills to learn. The first one is kind of a review on the strategy for whichever polynomial comes your way, whether it's a trinomial or a binomial. We want to have a strategy to factor them. So if it's two terms, remember that it's going to be the difference of squares that is factorable. The sum of squares is not factorable. So the difference of squares, do not change the order for any reason. Whatever is first stays first in here and in the factor. Whatever's last gets rooted here. And then the signs, it's always negative in the middle, and it's always one positive and one negative. Okay? For three terms, a equals 1. Remember, the a in the proper order is here, so you won't see it. When it's a 1, it'll just start with your variable squared, and then one variable, and then your constant. If there's two variables, this is the proper order for it, so make sure they're in the proper order before you factor them. Remember to predict the signs, if you'd like, according to this chart. If your trinomial has two positives, your answer and your factors will have two positives. Find all the factors of C if it's helpful, and then you need to add or subtract them. Remember, these are added, these are subtracted from each other to get your B, and find several combinations that work. So this is basically a review. It's suggested that you have some form of this in your notes for your tests. So let's practice some of these. This one has three terms. Notice that a is 1, so it's missing. This is the proper order of a trinomial that has two variables. Each square is on the end. A mix is in the middle of the variables. So we know that when we go to factor them, the first variable goes here, the last variable goes here, and then because they're plus and plus, these are plus and plus. Now I want to look at the numbers. If you notice, C is a perfect square of 7. So 7 and 7 added together make 14, multiplied together make 49, and it's the same thing twice. So there's that one. This one is a trinomial. A equals 1. Root the variable here and here. When the sign is plus and minus, according to the chart, 1 plus 1 minus, that means factors of 20. And this is going to be subtracted. You might have already thought about it, but if you don't automatically know the answer, then this is the process you might want to try. So 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. There we go. Subtract, there's a 1 difference in this. To get a positive 1, you want to have a positive 5 and a negative 4. So that's 5 and 4. Okay, that's your answer. This one here, trinomial. Negative and then a positive is 2 negatives. 20, 2 negatives. This was an add factors to get the 12. So 1 and 20 is 21. 2 and 10 is 12. There we go. I need a 2 and a 10. And that's my answer. Here's a binomial. Root the first, root the last, and if it's always a negative here, so it's a 1 plus and 1 minus. Okay, let's try the next page. This is your warm-up for skill 2. solve for x. So we're going backwards to unit 1 for a minute. If you're solving for x in the equation, remember you want to notice that this is your only variable, so you need to move other terms away. You move things by adding their opposite. So that's 5. If it's a positive, you want to add their opposite to make a 0. So that's -5. If it's being multiplied and not added, remember we're isolating our variable by dividing by same. And a two-step would be get rid of the other term first by moving it properly, adding its opposite, and then isolating your variable by multiplying or dividing by same. Okay. Identify equation or expression. This is an expression. This is an equation because it has an equal sign. Okay. We probably haven't been throwing around a linear equation enough, although in unit 2 we realized that a linear equation will make a straight line on a graph, linear line, right? So we may not have emphasized the fact that linear equations have x to the first power, or just an x, right? So what is something with a squared power? This is a quadratic, so this is linear. This is quadratic. And this will also be quadratic because when this gets FOILed together, then you'll have an x squared. Okay, so quadratics are x squared. Linears are single x squared. Why does that matter? It matters on how you solve a problem. These problems up here that I just solved are linear equations. We follow DCMI to solve our linear equations. For quadratic equations, it's different. Okay? So for quadratic equations, let's explore our next skill. Use the zero property rule to solve quadratic equations. Okay, we're going to use, quadratic equations by factoring and using the product rule is what we're required to do. So let me get this all on the screen here. Sorry, the light's not that great. Let me see about the focus. That's as good as it's going to get. All right, the zero product rule. Product, multiplication. So if something times something equals 0, then either of those somethings have to be a 0. Okay, so what does that mean for us? Well, linear equations can be solved by isolating the variable. Solving x squared or quadratic equations requiring using the zero product rules to solve for x. When multiplying two factors, their product is 0, then one of the factors must be 0. That's requoting this in word terms, okay? So solve for x when x is squared using the following steps with the zero product rule. Here we go. Step 1, is the quadratic equation equal to 0? So look at this one. There's not an equal 0 here, so that's a no. So if not, move all terms properly to one side. So using DCMI, you want to move by adding its opposite. So we're going to add 24 to both sides. That gets rid of it over here, and there's my equal to 0 that I'm required to have to solve a quadratic equation, okay? These are not like terms. Don't put them together. Make a trinomial out of that, okay? And then step 2, factor or FOIL the polynomial. So FOIL would be putting them back together, but factor them, you know what I'm talking about, right? So this is a plus and a plus, x and an x, factors of 24 that add up to 11, 8, and 3. Now comes in the zero product rule. Because we're set to 0, this is an equation, a quadratic equation that says that we're going to say this is either equal to 0 or this is equal to 0. This is a factor. This is a factor. Okay, the whole thing. So this factor gets set to 0 and this factor gets set to 0. and then you're solving for x. That's how you're going to get this -8, and then you're solving for x, which gets you a -3. Okay, so we're factoring, we're getting ready to factor, then we're factoring, and then we're solving. Okay, this means that this x here could be a -8 or it could be a -3. So I'll show you that on the next one in the next practice and prove to you that that's true. Okay.